let's do the review. Um, oh, right. I guess the only announcements left for the online classes, I will be putting the tests up later today since they need a week to do their tests. And I need to be able to get everything graded and the grades put in by next Tuesday. So next Monday is the absolute last time uh, for them to, for the online students to get the grades in. Um, once the tests are done, the tests are done. There is no like, I didn't see the test for the week that it was up, so get it taken care of. As far as you guys, all of you that are here, um, your exam is Friday at 8:30 in here. That said, I'll also be here Thursday at 8:30. Um, if you have another exam on Thursday and you just words and get this one over with, you're welcome to. Um, so, yeah, whatever you want to do. I'll be here Wednesday though. Wednesday is my only day off this week, so I'm taking that. And tomorrow, once again, is movie day. If you want to come in and watch some Cold War movies for a little bit extra credit, you're welcome to. Again, not required, but I encourage it. They're movies that I have seen almost every year for the past almost 10 years, and I still enjoy them. So, well, I've not seen. I've added Doctor Strangelove to it relatively recently, but the Atomic Cafe I find entertaining every single time. Um, so, yeah, they're fun movies to watch. Um, yeah, so that's all I got. And also for the online students that have emailed me like late last night, the paper's due today, so get that in there. For those of you that are doing the second paper, yeah. So that's all I got. Let's do the study guide, which we're limited to the amount of participants, but hopefully we can get it done. Okay. Let's start here. So, starting with chapter 20. Immediately following the Civil War, what was the main focus of the U.S. government? Yes, westward expansion, westward territories. Yeah, because as I said, you can kind of argue that was imperialism, or maybe it wasn't. It's kind of a gray area. Obviously, the Americans at the time would argue that it wasn't because, oh, well, those weren't sovereign territories. It was just the natives, and they don't count. Um, but, however you want to look at that. Okay. At the beginning of American imperialism, what country was the main targeted market for industrial products? What country did we want to go to and sell all our crap to? Not Germany. No, Germany, we were selling our crap to Germany. This was a country that we had to, quote, break into the market to sell our crap to. And there was a specific reason we went to this country. It was China because they had a lot of people. Pretty basic economics. They had a lot of people, therefore they could buy a lot of stuff. It did take like a couple of wars though, but we eventually broke into the Chinese market. as well as other takeovers. Um, while imperialists tried to gain access to China, what island chain was taken over by white plantation owners and American Marines? Hawaii, correct. Alright, so that's that. So, as far as spreading Americanism, ahead of the economic incentives, what was the, quote, first wave of American imperialism? So before even opening markets, what was the first, I guess you could say, tip of the spear when it came to spreading American ideals and imperialism? What group tended to go out first to prepare the people for American civilization, if you will? Not the military. Right, which would be what? What one word would fit that? Yes. Missionaries. Sent missionaries out to convert the people, not just spiritually, but also get them more used to Western culture. Okay, mindset stuff. Who wrote The White Man's Burden, which suggested it was the burden of white men to spread the light of civilization to the rest of the world? Yeah, Kipling, Rudyard Kipling. Which again, like in my European history class, it specifically says how this was satire, but in my American history class it doesn't. It's weird. do 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 do. What did Alfred Mahan think would undermine military security due to this group's supposed unwillingness to use force? Yeah, he didn't want women to be able to vote, because if they could vote, then they wouldn't let us go to war anymore. Can't have that. And finally, and Mahan was a member of this group, what was the term for those who felt war was necessary to maintain civilization and one's manhood? Yeah, jingoist. I mean, today we'd, I guess, call them war hawks, but jingoist was much more not just like, we should go to war because military-industrial complex, but this is like, we should go to war because my manhood, and also because we're like the dominant civilization and that's our right. It was real weird. Okay. I think that's it for that. Then there's a whole lot of Cuba stuff. Whoa, didn't mean to do that. So let's go to Cuba stuff. Alright. Starting with, against what country did Cuba fight a war of independence with some minor aid from the United States towards the end? Who's Cuba fighting? Spain. Yeah. A lot of countries in Central and South America, and then also the Caribbean, fought Spain to gain their independence. Spain apparently wasn't a very good colonial overlord. let's see. Not that there were very many good, air quotes, colonial overlords, like, at all. Um, what was the main advantage that the Cuban rebels had over the Spanish? What was their advantage in the war? Terrain is part of it, but there was a major advantage. Yeah, there was all sorts of awful tropical diseases in Cuba, and if you're living in Cuba and you're not dead yet, then you must be at least resistant to them. Um, and the Spanish that came over to fight were not, and so they were dropping like flies. Okay. Moving on a little bit to America getting involved. So in the War of 1898, which is what we called our involvement in the war, um, what was the term for the type of journalism used by reporters covering the war, which often used atrocities to gain support? Yellow journalism. Yes. This was the term for the type of journalism used by reporters covering the Cuban War for Independence, which often used atrocities to gain support for the war. I also, specifically in the question, I call it the War of 1898, which is what we in America called it, because we were only there for a year. What was the event on February 15th, 1898, which pushed America into the war in Cuba? Yeah, the main explosion, the main sinking, whatever you want to say. But just remember the main, because I had a student last week that was like, that ship blew up. I'm like, correct. You got to name the ship though. Yeah, the main. That was like the rallying cry was remember the main. So you guys have to remember the main. I know that was like 100 years before any of y'all were born, but yeah, you got to remember the main. Okay. Um, I wish there were more people in here for this one because I like for a lot of people to be able to answer this. What group did Teddy Roosevelt form and lead in the war in Cuba? Yeah, because we already asked that, but I figured, hey, I can technically ask this again, so I did. So there it is. All right. A few more uh, specific ones than the Rough Riders. Uh, what was the name for the amendment which pledged to aid Cuban independence but limited its sovereignty afterwards? There were two amendments that were put in place. This is the first one. Yeah, this is the Teller Amendment. And again, this one is multiple choice, and that other amendment isn't in there to confuse you, so just know the Teller Amendment. Okay, one more for Cuba. Um, what was the term for Cuba's diplomatic position with the United States immediately following their war for independence? So, what was Cuba diplomatically in relation to the U.S.? Because I even had that it was a cover of the Puck magazine, I believe, where it was like Cuba's first steps alone, and it had the little sash that said on the side of it. And also something Britain liked to do around this time too. It's like, oh, what's that? Not a territory. We did that to Puerto Rico, I think. Now, this was more independent than that, technically. They were able to do what they wanted internally, but any like external stuff they had to go through us. Obviously, they're not this anymore. It's a word we don't use much anymore. It's a very hmm? No, no, not that old. No, it's a very, very 19th century word. Not quite. What? Not, no, I said not quite. Not quite colony. It's a little newer than that. Yeah, it's a protectorate. Because again, it's like we're viewing the people as children, as like lesser than. So we're looking at it as, oh, we're helping them by reducing their sovereignty and treating them like a child of a country, essentially, despite the fact that they had basically already won their war before we got involved. So we're protecting them from other countries by interfering with their diplomatic sovereignty. Also, on the other side of the world, what U.S. military leader defeated a flotilla in Manila Bay on May 1st, 1898? Actually, I need to look this up real quick. Not the answer, but what a flotilla is like. What flotilla? Flotilla. There. I just want to see what like unit wise that how big that is. Flotilla 1898. Size. Who defeated the Spanish flotilla in Manila Bay? Two or more squadrons. Wow, that really helps. Thank you so much. Jesus. Freaking military terms like, oh, it's these other things. Thank you, other thing. Yeah, okay. This is a military term for sure. A flotilla has no less than 3 ships, but can be as many as 20. Screw it. All right. So who defeated no less than 3, but at least 20 Spanish ships in Manila Bay? Who was the American commander? Yeah, George Dewey. That's another thing I hate about like military unit compositions when it gets really fluid. It's like, just say like 12, guys, come on. Anyway, what island chain was later taken over by the United States around the same time as the Cuban War of Independence? Which was, Manila was the capital of this island chain. The Philippines. Now, obviously, I'm skipping the whole, like, we were at war with them for 12 years thing and genocided a lot of the people there, but, you know, it's a multiple choice question. I can't get too into detail there. All right, Panama. After Theodore Roosevelt became president, who suggested that the United States invest in a canal across the Isthmus of Panama? It's a guy that we have already mentioned. He wasn't an answer, but he was in a question. Well, Teddy Roosevelt didn't tell Teddy Roosevelt to build Panama Canal. I don't know. He might have been nuts enough to have a split personality. He seemed pretty well adjusted, though. Mahan, yes. Alfred Thayer Mahan. What was the country that Roosevelt had to negotiate with in order to gain rights to building the Panama Canal prior to an independence movement, which he, of course, supported? So what country actually owned the land that would become Panama once Panama became independent? He did have to negotiate with Britain because of the whole Pacific Ocean thing, but it wasn't Britain. Then he had to buy the land from France, but it wasn't France. Colombia. Yeah, because Colombia, it was just like an extension of Colombia's territory. Even though he had to go through, like, I don't know what she's talking about. Okay, yeah. And then there was the whole, independence movement that totally wasn't part of some, like, conspiracy thing. After the Panama Canal was built, what did the president add to the Monroe Doctrine to signal the U.S. intended to intervene in Western Hemisphere affairs? Yes, the Roosevelt Corollary. I would like to mention that while this is multiple choice, I specifically don't have in the question that we're talking about President Roosevelt, but in the previous two questions, I mentioned that we're talking about President Roosevelt, so if you're paying halfway attention, you should be fine. But, sometimes this still gets people, so yeah. I just felt like it'd be a little bit too easy if I said, what thing did President Roosevelt add to the Monroe Doctrine? And have Roosevelt Corollary in the question, or in the answers. Okay, Asia stuff. In China, what was the name of the nationalist uprising which America helped to suppress in order to gain a foothold there? The Boxer Rebellion. In China, yes. Which was, come to find out, when I took like a modern China history course when I was in undergrad, it was kind of a big deal. Like, they very nearly did overthrow the government of China. So had they been left alone, they might have actually created a new Chinese government. Which would have been an interesting turn of history. Over in Japan, in 1904 to 1905, what country did Japan defeat in order to gain international prestige? Russia. That was the Russo-Japanese War. And following said war, what American president helped to settle the peace terms before sending the U.S. fleet on something of a victory lap? Following the war between Russia and Japan, what American president helped to settle the peace terms, because America had to get involved, before sending the U.S. fleet on something of a victory lap? Sent the American fleet all around the world to show how good we are at doing peace. Also, here's our Navy. It was Roosevelt again. Despite how much I wanted to talk about Roosevelt last chapter, we might be talking about Roosevelt more this chapter than the last one. I think that might actually be it for... Yeah, that's actually it for that chapter. So on to World War I. Oh, wait, no, World War I's in the same chapter. I forgot because, World War I's such a small part of our history, relatively speaking. So before World War I even began, or the Great War as I like to call it, because again, I'm a European historian, before the war even began, what country did the United States have diplomatic tensions with, resulting in a failed raid across national borders? And I'll give you a hint. It's a raid across national borders. There's only two choices. Correct. Don't flip that coin and choose the wrong one. We tried that in 1812 and they whipped us. And they burned down Washington, D.C. So, just saying, we tried that before and it didn't go well. All right. During the Great War, the British used a blockade against the Central Powers. What was the German response? What did the Germans do against the British blockade? I mean, what could they do against the British blockade? With what? This was World War I. They didn't really have planes. U-boats. I mean, they had Zeppelins, but you don't want to fly a Zeppelin towards a ship that's got big cannons. Right, yeah. That's not a great idea. Zeppelins were better for bombing cities. Cities don't move around and they tend to not have guns. Also better to do that at night when they don't see you. Speaking of U-boat, oh shoot, I missed a thing before U-boats. This is very important. What was the event which actually sparked World War I in Europe? What was the thing that happened that caused World War I to start in Europe? No, that's World War I. But what did? Yeah. It's like what happened? How did he start it? Yeah. Archduke. That he was the second in line, next in line to the throne of Austria, which is why that was a big deal. Just in case you didn't know. All right. Why is there so much space? Okay. Speaking of U-boats, what cruise liner was sunk by the Germans, which prompted many Americans to call for war? The Lusitania. I spelled that right. What missive or telegram was one of the last tipping points towards America joining the First World War? So what's the telegram that got a lot of Americans wanting to jump in and fight some Germans? The Zimmerman Note, yes. It's often called the Zimmerman Note here in America. And one more thing happening over in Europe. I see, is there? Because everything else is like stuff going on at home. What event in Russia weakened the Allies and made the ending of the war that much harder? Yeah, the Bolshevik Revolution. Because once that happened, Russia was no longer in the war. And that pulled out a lot of, well, I mean, that allowed for Germany to pull all of its forces from the east and turn them back west. All right. Stuff going on back home. Who was in charge of the Food Administration in the U.S. said children planting vegetable gardens was, quote, just as real and patriotic an effort as the building of ships and the firing of cannon? Hoover. Just to give you guys a hint, this is going to be a pattern. In case I didn't make that clear when we were going through it in class. Hoover's going to be in charge of a lot of stuff. Who got in trouble for saying that the draft was a form of slavery and was sentenced to 10 years in prison? Pardoned after 3. This was someone we talked about. Shoot, it's been several chapters now. He was in a one of the labor strikes way back when. Yeah, Eugene V. Debs. And I should have mentioned this before we talked about Debs, but what two acts passed in Congress in 1917 and 1918 used to keep people from speaking out against the draft or expressing any ideals that were seen as un-American? Excuse me. Okay, that's one. Yes, the Espionage and Sedition Act. Acts. Okay, a few more before we get on to the next chapter. What was the main aspect of Wilson's 14 points, which he would keep, What was the main aspect of Wilson's 14 points, which he felt would keep another world war from happening? I remember I showed you guys the 14 points. So this is the main one that we really need to worry about. This was meant to stop another world war from happening. I mean, they were technically all meant to avoid the problems that started the First World War, but this one was the main one. Yes, the League of Nations. So he got this ratified in Europe. Who led the anti-treaty action against Wilson back in the U.S.? And I mostly remember him because of that final image I showed you guys, because his last name is easy to use as a visual pun. Yeah, Henry Cabot Lodge. Or specifically just Lodge. Because that's what you'd call a large hunting cabin, and that picture I showed you guys was of the cabin, the Cabot Lodge, with the treaty nailed up as like a hunted skin. Okay, that's it for that. Now on to the 1920s, and then we'll be done. And I feel like we're closer to being done because most of the short answers are from that first bit. There's not very many short answers left. All right. What was the name? Is that it? Yeah. What was the name for the general fear of communism overrunning America right after World War I? The Red Scare. Makes sense. In response to the Red Scare, what series of legal crackdowns saw American liberty suspended for the sake of safety from these communist threats? Threats, of course, being in air quotes. The front of the dude's house got bombed, and he's like, "Oh, we got to take out these communists." So he used that as an excuse to like basically round up any immigrants he thought. Yeah, Palmer raids. McCarthyism before McCarthy was a thing. Where's my clicker's way over there? Okay, let's pull that up. Okay. After the series of anti-communist raids, so after, for goodness sake, after the Palmer raids, what group was formed in order to protect American liberties and freedoms from government overreach and overreactions? Yeah, the American Civil Liberties Union. American type Civil Liberties Union. Or as they're better known, ACLU. Far more devastating than the Great War itself, what natural disaster hit in 1918, killing between 50 to 100 million people worldwide? Hmm? It was the 1918 natural disaster. Almost exactly 100 years ago. Like, almost ironically, 100 years ago, considering how people handled it. Yeah. The Spanish flu. Apparently, or as it was called after we realized it actually wasn't from Spain, just the influenza pandemic. Yeah, and apparently you also have to act like an idiot about it, because a lot of people did. Um, On to racism. Yay. Uh, In what American city did the worst racial violence known as Red Summer occur? Chicago. Had a couple of students last week saying like Alabama. I was like, you're not wrong for guessing that, but it wasn't that. Now I'm moving a little bit in terms of the notes because I'm moving the Klan, which is several sections further down. So if you're going through the notes, we're skipping through the economy section a little bit. So as far as staying within theme, let's see. Where was the Ku Klux Klan refounded in the 1920s? Stone Mountain, down in Georgia. And it's still there. The little monument they carved in the side of the mountain is very much still there, as much as people have tried to lobby to have it, sandblasted off. Also, what were the two symbols of the KKK after their founding in the mid-1920s? The two symbols they, quote, bowed to. The American flag and the burning cross. Because they stood for... Wow. Because they stood for, in their minds, true Americanism, which is to say anti-immigration, and Christianity in a way that excluded Catholicism, because Catholicism wasn't real Christianity in their minds. So anti-Judaism and anti-Catholicism, in addition to also being racist. So they were adding anti-immigrants and anti-Catholics and Jews to their hit list. So yeah. Back to economic stuff. Actually, we should start with the scandal because that's actually where the economic stuff starts out. The name of the scandal, which saw government officials divvying out land to the Mammoth Oil Company in exchange for under-the-counter cash. The Teapot Dome scandal. What's that? Yes. This was a scandal where the government officials divvied out land to the Mammoth Oil Company in exchange for under-the-counter cash. Just very illegal use of government lands for shady money. Not something you'd ever expect the government to do, when they could just do it out in the open. What automaker perfected the assembly line, which helped to push the second industrial revolution in the United States, which still makes me want to puke because that's not what the second industrial revolution was, but whatever. Henry Ford. Because again, he didn't invent the assembly line, and he sure as hell didn't invent the car, but he just did a good job of putting them together. Loan repayment. With Europe, and especially Germany, hard-pressed to repay war loans, what system of revolving door loans did the United States set up to get recovery funds flowing? So what system of loans were given to Germany so they could start rebuilding their economy, which then they could give money to France and Britain, so that then France and Britain could give money back to the U.S.? It was this weird cyclical thing that would only work as long as America could give money to Germany. It wasn't the Marshall Plan. It was a plan, and it was named after, I think it was someone in Congress. Dawes Plan, yep. Different from the Dawes Act, which we saw earlier this semester. Alright, we are nearing the end. Who was the Secretary of Commerce who pushed for the American plan of tying health insurance and pension plans to jobs in order to weaken unions? Who's in charge of the, Department of Commerce? It was Hoover again. And if we're talking about a federal agency, it's going to very likely be Hoover. Where did real estate speculation boom in the 1920s, only to crash after storms caused land value to drop in 26 and 28? Where did real estate speculation boom in the 20s, only to crash after storms caused land value to drop in 1926 and 1928? Was that Florida? Yeah, because Florida tends to become land soup when the storms come by, and they tend to have a lot of storms. Turns out. There's a curse on the land. The Seminole natives did not leave without laying some generations-long traps. They made deals with the gators, I guess. Yeah. I mean, how do you live somewhere where the logs want to kill you? All right. What was the name of the belief that the Bible was meant to be read literally, which was a response to changing moral values in the United States? Fundamentalism. Whoa. Fundamentalism. What scientific idea became a problem for the previous group, the fundamentalists, culminating in a court case in Dayton, Tennessee? So what scientific idea was a problem for the fundamentalists? Evolution. Who wrote on the origin of species, which caused the previous issue, which caused the issue of evolution for fundamentalists? Charles Darwin. Because I needed to throw in another question. So I was like, oh, let's talk about evolution again. All right, we're almost done. So let's talk about the very start of the Great Depression, since we're not actually going to talk about the chapter. What event on October 29th, 1929 began the Great Depression in America and consequently the rest of the world? Black Tuesday, also Black Tuesday is the name for it, but what happened? What was the event? Yeah, stock market crash. I mean, either is fine. If you write Black Tuesday, I'll give it to you. That one is a short answer. That one is the last short answer. There's not very many for that chapter. And the last one. Who was the president of the United States at the beginning of the Great Depression? And I'll give you a hint. We've talked about this person several times already. It was Hoover again. You'd think, poor guy, having been every federal agency known to man, he'd be ready to go, but he wasn't. And that's it. Yeah, just again, if you if you want to come in tomorrow for the movie day, you can. If not, that's fine. I don't think too many people in here actually need the extra credit. But you're welcome. Again, the regular date for the exam is Friday, but if you want to come in Thursday at 8:30, I'll be here for one of my other tests. So if you want to come in and just get it done early, you're welcome to as well. Otherwise, I'll see y'all on exam day, because that's it for that. So I'm going to end the stream.